Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we have Fatima Doman, and she is talking about us once again about strengths. She'd come here a while ago and we talked about her first book, Authentic Strengths, and now she has a new children's book. Please hold it up. Can you show me the picture of
I
your book?
will
Yay!
do
Okay.
it.
And it's called True Joy, Authentic Strengths for Kids. So welcome again.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be on your show, CJ. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about what inspired this children's book.
Well, I was teaching around my first book, Authentic Strengths,
Mm-hmm.
and I was working with organizations and corporate clients, and people said to me, I wish I had had this when I was a child. And then, kind of serendipitously, schools started reaching out to me at the same time, saying, "Do you have anything for kids?" So anyway, I went ahead and collaborated with an amazing illustrator and someone who's wonderful at prose, and the three of us created this book.
How fun. How very much. And so tell me about how kids are receiving this book.
It's starting to really resonate around the world. As a matter of fact, I just had a call yesterday with the school system, the largest school system in Romania,
Wow.
and they found the book on Amazon and they contacted me and they said, "We want you to come and train 38 of our teachers and coaches,
Wow.
and we want to roll it out throughout Romania." So, and it's in Brazil, so now 9 countries are
Mm.
using this book and this process. But of course, the VIA character strengths, they're these scientifically valid, 24 strengths of character. Those have been around since the early 2000s. And it's that science that I use in my approach with schools and also with organizations.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about schools and how they're using it. What age group are they working with and how are they using the book?
So I've had school districts that use it K through 12. Every child receives some level of training or instruction around character strengths. So one of the first school districts that I ever certified, they brought 27 of their counselors, nurses, teachers to the training, and I taught them how to teach this to teens and high school students, ages 12 through 18, but then they customized it for the younger kids. And since then, I wrote the book for the really young kids, True
Hmm.
You, Authentic Strengths for Kids, and to kind of help them to modify it for those younger groups. So we have full-fledged training programs that we use in schools and that are customized for every age group, which is
Mm.
really. And then, of course, we're still working in corporations with adults, teaching them about their character strengths and how to use those. And just to very briefly to tell you about the science behind it, we know from hundreds of research studies that have been conducted around the world that when people learn how to use their character strengths and they use them consistently, resilience goes up,
Hmm.
engagement goes up,
Hmm.
achievement goes up.
Hmm.
So there are just a lot of positive benefits. There's a huge list
And is
of
that
the.
is that the resilience and engagement and energy, which are and fulfillment, all those things? How are those things measured when people use their strengths? You said that it's been scientifically proven. In what way and what are they finding?
So there have been, like I said, hundreds of research studies around the world, and these are really top-notch research studies with universities. I mean, University of Pennsylvania,
Mm-hmm.
um, Harvard uses these strengths. Columbia University, I'm presenting in October a paper at Columbia
Mm-hmm.
University about how to use strengths for coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I also co-authored a chapter in a new coaching textbook, positive psychology coaching textbook. So this is just really resonating and growing this reach of how to use your character strengths. And there have been all of these studies, like I mentioned, and you can go to the VIA website or to my website, AuthenticStrengths.com, and we have a science tab
Hmm.
that you can take a look at and look at a lot of the research.
Yeah, cool.
So, Yeah, there's a lot of science behind it.
Okay, and so when I want to, since you're applying this for someone who's maybe younger that's reading a children's book, and then maybe someone in high school, and then someone who may be in a corporation, as your various audiences, is the message the same regardless of your audience? And if so, what are you suggesting people do once they take a via strengths? It's called via Strengths Finder, via character strengths profile. So I
Right.
have mine here. What would you say to maybe a 5-year old, a 16-year-old, or a 55-year-old like myself?
So, the first step is to take your strength survey online and it's free.
Hmm.
So, anybody who's listening, go online, go to authenticstrengths.com, and on the landing page, you'll see a button that says Take Free Strength Survey.
Hmm.
Just click on that, and it'll take you about 10 minutes, and
Hmm.
then it'll give you a report that'll show your 24 character strengths in rank order. And then if you want a more expanded report, there are 20-page reports and 30-page reports. You can email me and we can make that happen. But the free report is a 2-page report.
And I think this is
And
what mine looks like, just for people who can see it online. So it has these 24 strengths, and then it's stack rank based on the highest number of times that you I assume represented that strength. I'm not sure, and then it actually goes all the way down.
exactly. So it'll show you your top strengths first, and those are the strengths that we call signature strengths. They're kind of like your signature in life.
Hmm.
And those are the strengths that you tend to use more often and that you are more comfortable using.
Right.
So when you took the survey, it's a scientifically valid survey that's been taken by over 7 million people worldwide.
Hmm.
Um, and in 190 countries.
Hmm.
And like I said earlier, many, many research studies have shown that the benefits of it. So we see benefits not just in goal attainment and achievement, but like I said earlier, in resilience. University of Zurich came out with a study in 2016 that showed that character strengths use predicted resilience.
That's interesting. Wait, the character strengths used, meaning you're using your character strengths, actually made you more resilient.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. Okay, so let's actually look at this report as an example. So someone will take their free report off of your website, and the first one they have it's categorized into three sections. So the first five are you call them signature strengths, and so I'll just use mine as an example. So mine is honesty, perspective, creativity, love, and curiosity. So tell me a little bit about, and everyone's going to have their own, and we don't have to go into these five, but how would I actually take these five and now do something with it? Because oftentimes you had said, like, if you're a 5-year old, if you're talking to a 5-year-old me, 16-year-old me, and now me, what would you say to do with these character strengths?
So those top five character strengths are what give you the most energy and engagement. We know that, like I
Hmm.
said, from those hundreds of studies.
Right.
So what you would want to do is focus on leveraging those in your daily tasks.
Okay.
So for example, I heard, honesty, I heard creativity. And if you were unable, for example, to use your creativity in your work, how would that land on you?
Yeah, not well. It's important for me to constantly be creating and being creative.
So that's part of your core nature.
Hmm.
That's part of what truly energizes you. And when you start to make that connection, it's a very important connection because sometimes people are in work roles where they find themselves languishing and they're not quite sure why, but they're just feeling really disconnected. And when I coach these people, we often discover that they've disassociated themselves from their strengths at work. They're
Mm,
just in a job where they don't have many opportunities to use their top strengths. So, what we do in the coaching is find creative ways that they can bring in their top strengths so that they can infuse their job with more energy. And let me give you a real life example of
perfect.
that.
Yeah.
So when I was writing, these two books, so one of my top strengths is social intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And I love being around people. I love training people. I just love that interaction. When you're writing a book, you're alone in your office. And for me, it was like scratching a chalkboard to do that for hours on end. And so I had to get creative and how can I use my social intelligence and bring more joy into writing these books. So I collaborated with people. I made it, an interactive process for myself. I interviewed a lot of people for the first book, Authentic Strength.
Mm.
And in the second book, I collaborated with an amazing, prose writer and illustrator, and the relationship of creating it together is what fed my spirit.
Uh,
Um, and there are people who do like to work independently, so they probably wouldn't want to collaborate with someone else, and they'd love writing a book all by themselves. But to understand those things about ourselves and what gives us energy, that's the key.
okay, so for mine, I understand creativity, and I'm looking over some of the other things on the list. So, um, humor, zest, hope, love of learning, forgiveness, humility, fairness, leadership, teamwork, gratitude, bravery, kindness, self-regulation, prudence, application of beauty, I think, or appreciation of beauty, spirituality, curiosity. So these are much more, and you mentioned this last time that we talk about this, is that these are kind of more, they're kind of a cross between values and then strengths. So how does one, so mine is love. One of mine top five is love. How would I use that at work? I'm trying to figure out how to use this in the appropriate context because your point was, hey, some people actually, once they know these things, they're trying to be in jobs where they would be able to use some of these strengths.
So I was at a coaching conference and I remember seeing a leader in the positive psychology field
Mm-hmm.
mention that he coached a four-star general, a U.S. four-star general, and the general was really shocked to see that leadership was not in his top five, but his number one strength was love.
Wow,
Okay.
interesting.
So you're a four-star general. You work in this military machine, and your top
Mm-hmm.
strength is love. And it created a really interesting discussion in this conference for people
Right,
because we talked about how do you bring love to work? I mean, love to work in a normal work setting, let alone in a military setting,
right,
right?
right.
And so what people are discovering, for example, about that strength of love is that it is very appropriate to bring it to work. It's a caring for the people that you work for. It's a desire to see what's best for them, to have their backs, to have their best interest in mind, to not have a hidden agenda, to truly have a desire to develop people because you truly care.
Mm.
So those are the ways that you could bring love to the workplace.
And so let's say that the four-star general was like, yeah, I can't do any of those things. Um, or I guess I'm listening to those things, and yes, of course, a four-star general. But let's say that you're writing a book, which is there is a way of loving and helping people, but it's also a very different kind of. So let's say that you going back to like you like to actually be independent, and you're also wanting to write a book, and love is also. How would those things combine?
So you could pour your love of the subject matter into the book, and you could channel that strength that way. If you're more of an introverted person who, I social intelligence was very high for me, as I mentioned earlier. So
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be around other people. But let's say that you do like to work independently, but love is one of your highest strengths also.
Mm-hmm.
So you might, like I said, pour your love for the subject matter into the book, or think about how this is going to make a positive impact in people's lives when they read the book, and have that motivate your work as well. There are many ways that you can find to channel any one of the 24 character strengths, but it requires some intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's really helpful to have a strengths coach to help you see how you can do that. Sometimes people just they don't understand the science of strengths, of character strengths, well enough to really understand how to leverage them in their own lives. So that's why it's very helpful to read books about these character strengths and to tap into what we know is working for people around the world. We know that these character strengths are universal around the world.
Right. So let's say that the other one I is honesty. I can see how I could apply some of that in their perspective. Um, I can see that. So I have the five of honesty, perspective, creativity, love, and curiosity. And tell me, what are your top five, just out of curiosity?
So gratitude is my number one.
Okay.
And by the way, you might think this is very interesting as well. I think this is one of the most interesting things about character strengths. So when we use them optimally, excellent benefits and we get these great results. But did you know that there's a shadow side of strengths as well?
Mm-hmm.
So you can overuse a strength and underuse a strength.
Mm-hmm.
So gratitude being my number one strength, when I overuse gratitude,
Mm-hmm.
it comes off as ingratiation. So, oh, thank you, thank you. And it can cause problems actually for people to overuse any one of these strengths. Often people will think, gratitude, how can you overuse that? You can. You can say yes to too many projects and too much work and just be so grateful for everything that comes and then find yourself out of balance. And that's what happened to me. So it's important for people to understand that when you use these strengths, you want to learn how to use them optimally. So, for example, leadership, when it's used optimally, it has magnificent benefits for people, for self and others. But think about overusing it, despotism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so there's actually a list of the underuse and overuse of strengths in addition to the optimal use. And honestly, the name of the strength, when it's used optimally, is the name that's used on the 24 character strengths list you have. But
Interesting. So I totally understand honesty. I can see how that could go awry. So you have these five strengths that you have, and you're saying they can be overused as well. And so what I did, when I did this, I did the short report, which is a 2-page report that you mentioned, and then the longer report. And it does talk about what I thought was interesting about that report that this one doesn't, is it explains the shadow side. So how the shadow side appears. And so for you, like in a day to day, day in, day out kind of life experience, how does that come across? Like, are you like, oh, I'm being too ingratiating, or like, what happens with your interacting with other people when you know both the positive and negative side of your strength? Like, how does that play out?
that's a great question. So when you're overusing a strength, you've heard the Asian proverb, he who is good with a hammer comes to think that everything is a nail.
Yes, yes,
So
I've heard
our
that.
five strengths, there are go-to strengths, and sometimes we defer to them too often. So one of the things that I teach my coaching clients is to ask themselves, is one of these top strengths appropriate right now? Because we're so enamored with them, right? And that brings into context also what we call strengths collisions.
Okay.
So that's another thing that has been observed, is that someone may have a top strength that means so much to them. For example, maybe creativity or zest.
Mm-hmm.
And then another colleague may have prudence as their top strength.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see how there might be a strengths collision between zest and creativity and then the person with prudence?
Mm-hmm.
So someone who's very zestful, hey, let's take this product to market. Let's do it
Right.
like ASAP.
Right.
And the person who's very prudent might say, hey, wait a minute, we haven't tested it long enough. We haven't crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. And they might get very uncomfortable. And they might be seen by the person with zest, with high zest, as a naysayer. The organization.
Right.
Whereas if they had a dialogue between the two of them to understand their unique strengths and what their top strengths are and why they are actually a benefit to the organization, bringing that diversity of thought and diversity of strength to the team, then they can collaborate, intentionally collaborate rather than get on each other's nerves.
Right. So you're talking about collaboration and how collaboration could be improved. So let's use an example that you just gave, which is, all right, I'm kind of like, I'm so excited that this new product launch, which is probably more where I lean. And I have my son who is like, yeah, but here are all the things that are wrong. You didn't say this. And I'm like, oh my God, can't you just focus on the positive things? So, so this is a potential dialogue that is running in my head as I'm having a conversation with actually my mother and son have a very similar, they probably have prudence as one of their high values. It's like prudence and probably self-regulation, which are
Right.
actually my too low, in my bottom five, right? So top five meets bottom five. You can imagine what my childhood and my mothering has been like. So we're in this scenario, right, where we're trying to collaborate. How does one, I'm pretty sure that my son and my mother have this prudent self-regulation piece, and I have this, kind of, I don't have, zest is kind of midpoint for me, but I have creativity and curiosity, which sometimes translates the curiosity perspective and creativity comes up with me doing a ton of ideation, which makes people who are prudent crazy, right? So you have these two people, you're calling it a collision. So my high five meets their low five. What would be, now that I know that perhaps my son and my mother are in this, my low five, and how would we work together?
Right. So that's where you turn a potential collision into a collaboration by, first of all, simply having the discussion about your different preferences. And can you imagine what having that language might open up for the three of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just being able to understand how you differ in the way you approach life and then developing an appreciation for your differences. So you need to go into it with the intention that you're doing it to build your relationship and that you're doing it to honor and appreciate each other.
Mm. Okay, give me an example of where you've actually done that and what happened as a result of the conversation. Where you collided with someone, which is hard for me to imagine given what I know of you. But let's say you've collided with someone or potential collision. Tell me a little bit about the collaborative conversation you had and what happened as a result.
I'd love to share with you a story about someone I coached who did that because this is a story that I think just about anybody listening can relate to. So, I coached this sales manager who had alienated everyone on their team. And actually, the reason I coached was because the CEO contacted me and said, this person, we're going to have to perhaps fire because people have filed formal complaints. And they said this person was a bully, this person was demeaning, all of these things. Well, I met the person and I thought, wow, doesn't seem like a bully to me. It was really hard for me to see the connections until we started talking and I looked at this person's strengths report.
Mm-hmm.
And so this person who'd been written up as a bully, again, love was this person's number one strength. And,
Wow.
and then honesty was really high and bravery was really high.
Oh, wow.
So in talking, I discovered this person was expressing their love for the company. They had helped build the company, and it would really irritate them when expensive mistakes were made, right? And they did not hold back because of their bravery. This person's bravery didn't hold back from telling people, "Hey, you made a terrible mistake,"
Oh.
and in really rough language, chastising people on the team. So in the coaching, this person learned to extend the love not only to the company they had helped build, but also to the people that they were working with. They came to understand that you can't build a successful company when you're alienating everyone else. So extending that caring and that kindness and that love to others, and then also you probably can guess that social intelligence was rather low for this person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why they had damaged so many relationships. So we worked on building social intelligence.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then when you looked at the people that reported to him, could you tell something about why his top five didn't work for them?
Right. So we did not analyze the strengths of the people who reported to
Mm-hmm.
this sales manager, but what we did, we just looked at the sales manager, and this is how it all got better. The sales manager used the bravery, so we channeled the bravery also that was very high to be willing to listen to constructive feedback, to just be open to it, and to communicate with the very people that he had offended, right? And sincerely apologize. And of course, people were really, reticent to believe that there was going to be a significant change. It took months. This person had to behave differently consistently over months. But at the end of those several months, others were just shocked at the bravery, really, that this person displayed in saying, okay, so this is what I'm doing to really work on building my social intelligence. How is it landing on you? And, is it making
Wow.
a positive difference on our team? And that takes a lot of bravery.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Interesting. So really, it was just one side of the equation, not both, that you looked at, and just simply by leaning into his five strengths of, bravery, creativity, was it? Bravery, creativity, honesty. I can't remember the other ones, but just leaning into those. Leadership was the other one.
Love.
Love.
Believe it or not, love was number one.
Yeah, yeah. So actually
It was
leaning
being
into those.
extended only to the company and not to the people.
Yeah. Oh, how
To the entity
fascinating.
itself, not to the people.
So I guess it's because it's a value that somehow you've contextualized, right? He just thought of it as love for the company and didn't think about love broader than that.
Right.
That's how. So it was just clearly a shift in perspective that, like, hey, this is your value. How would you take something that you already understand, which is love, and expand it to a larger group? So
Exactly.
I see.
And
Okay.
this person also did extend love to his inner circle, his core family, his nucleus family. But then he started to understand how it was appropriate to extend love to your coworkers as well.
Mm.
And what ways are appropriate to do that at
Mm-hmm.
work.
Mm-hmm. So that's a collision. You had said that there are instances of collisions, and then there are instances of what did you call them in here? Um, what are strength collisions, and how do you turn them to strengths collaborations? So that's what we just talked about. Is
Exactly.
basically how to go about doing that, and and when he did that, when actually the team had this kind of real conversation, it you said it turned things around in a couple of months.
It did. No, it was about 6 months. It was a few months.
Okay.
But because people had been really offended.
Right.
So it took time for them to see that the behavior was going to be consistent and long term. And in the end, this person not only kept their job, but they were offered equity in the company.
That's great.
So,
Oh, I love
yeah,
stories like that. Okay, so we have the top five that we talked about and how to use those and how whoops, I don't know if my camera is my camera even showing? Who knows? Is the camera
it
showing on
is.
here? Okay, so there's the top five that you have here, and we talked about how the top five can have both strengths and then also kind of darker sides, and then we talked about collisions of top five meets someone's and meets bottom five of your strengths, and then there are ones in the middle that you call middle strengths. Tell me a little bit about those.
So your middle strengths are strengths that you can draw on when you feel the need, and we
Hmm.
call them situational strengths. And you could
Hmm.
really, any strength could be a situational strength, even one of your lower strengths. The thing about your lower strengths is that they're probably going to be the ones that give you the least amount of energy, and that
Mm.
you might have some internal collisions with, right? And those are the ones that don't feel as comfortable, and you may not currently value them as much as the others. But when you look at those middle strengths, those are ones that are really easy to draw upon for situations. For example, when I was writing these books and I found myself having to work independently a lot, I did pull from some of those middle and lower strengths because the situation demanded it. And I did feel exhausted at the end of those work sessions, not energized like I do when I pull from my top strengths, but you can use them when the situation demands. Now, can people pull from a middle or even a lower strength and eventually come to really appreciate it and enjoy using it when it was not originally one of their authentically used strengths? Yes, there are many stories of people who've done that. One example of that is I coached a woman with the top strength of curiosity and a bottom strength of perseverance. So if you can imagine, was always starting new projects. She had very high level of learning also, just loved to explore new things, but then would not finish the projects because it was so low. And this person was in her 60s. She said, I'm 60 and I am ready to raise my perseverance. She said, I want to finish some things. I want to publish some articles, and I start these articles and then they remain unfinished on my desk. So in the coaching, we paired perseverance, using perseverance with the strength that she would enjoy using as well. So it's helpful if you can pair one of your lower strengths, if you're wanting to raise it, with a strength that you really enjoy. So she paired her perseverance with, and creativity was one of her top strengths as well. And over time, she would get creative on how she would reward herself each time she finished a task.
I see. Got it. So it's basically what I'm hearing is if you have a weakness, it's not the end of the world because you can take, or not a weakness, your bottom five. You could take some of your bottom five. And it's weird because bravery, I think of myself as relatively brave or courageous, and it's really low. So what is bravery? I don't know if I understand what bravery is.
So it's willingness to go against the group consensus if you have to. It's a
Okay.
willingness to speak up for what you really believe in and to take a stand,
Okay. All right. I actually, uh,
to take risks.
yeah, I do take risks, but they're not in a group context. I take risks, business risks, and do kind of courageous, push myself to do things that are beyond. But this is actually literally in a group context. Is that what
Right.
you mean? Okay, got it. So I'm probably more like if the public will wants that, I'm like, all right, okay, fine.
It's
So
in both contexts. Intrapersonal, meaning just with you,
right.
and then interpersonal with others. So any context.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because I would have thought was really high, but it's pretty low on mine. Other things like kindness, self-regulation, prudence, appreciation of beauty. I'm like, okay, yep, these are these are accurate. So, but like let's say that appreciation of beauty. So I would actually take my appreciation of beauty, which is on my bottom five here, and then I would
Yeah.
pair it with my top five of
Yeah.
love and creativity and curiosity, and figure out how. So give me an example of how I may do that. Or are there certain kind of natural pairings like, oh, well, that entree goes good with this red wine? Or like, is there a natural pairing of these things?
Actually, there's research that shows that there are many that kind of come together
Yes.
in groupings.
Yeah.
For example, kindness and love are very similar. And so let's say, so you said appreciation of beauty and excellence was very low for you,
Yeah, it's the lowest one for me.
the lowest one, and yet you have creativity very high.
Yes.
So you could clearly use your creativity to raise your appreciation of beauty and excellence, because maybe you could develop ways in which you came to really appreciate the things that you create.
Oh,
It sounds like you're creating. So it doesn't have to be a work of art, meaning a painting. Your work of art could be a new program that you develop, a new podcast that you brainstorm. And then
right.
you could sit back and truly enjoy the beauty in that. And
Okay, yes, I am really bad at that then. I totally get that. I do stuff, I'm like, okay, done. And then I don't go back and go, that was amazing. Like, look what you did. Isn't that fantastic? I'm like, okay, what's the next thing? There's no, there's no sense of, so being creative about how I would really appreciate those, gain a sense of appreciation for the things I create, or, but the thing is I do appreciate other people. So in terms of love, I do appreciate other people. So what is it? So is it just not appreciating the things that you create, or appreciating others?
or really appreciating things that are created. Also, appreciation of beauty and excellence has to do with, for example, nature, like
Um,
developing that sense of awe and wonder when you go on do you, I don't know if you go out
I
ever
do do it.
hiking.
I do go out a lot. I'm doing outdoors a lot, so it's kind of like, oh, it's actually I have to rely on my husband. So I don't know if the pairings sometimes come through literally a pair, because my husband is often the one's like, did you see that rainbow? I'm like, what? I'm like, oh my God, that is beautiful. So it's really through him appreciating things that it's actually through his eyes that I see the world anew and I appreciate it. But it's really like it doesn't, it's so low. It's literally the lowest on my list that I don't necessarily appreciate it as much. Is that part of it too? Is just pairing yourself? Because you were talking about an organization and collaboration, coming up with a diverse portfolio of people who have different strengths. So here I am, kind of not strong, the weakest of my areas, and here I have my husband who is, it's probably at least in the middle, very top middle or top of his strengths. So is this something that you think about in constructing teams too?
Yeah, definitely. Now, you need to be careful, and a lot of organizations would say you really can't use an assessment like this for hiring practices.
Right.
It depends on the organization, and we're not suggesting that people use it for that. But when you do have an intact team, when I do team consulting, team coaching, team training, the first thing that I do is I show them what we call their team strengths culture.
Oh, wow, what's that?
It's really fun. So I plot out for them each person on their team and their top strengths. And I help them to see as a team, we have this graph
Ah,
that's generated that will show, how many of these areas are represented on the team. And it's interesting. Sometimes teams have a huge gaping hole in a particular area. For example,
mm,
in the teaching industry, lately I've been working with schools more than ever. And people who go into that profession tend to go into it because it's a helping profession.
mhm,
So across the board in general, they tend to be very high in love, in kindness,
mm.
in the humanity strengths, right? But then when you get to perhaps the self regulation and the prudence, they tend to be lower. And
Mm.
that tends to be a gap. And they start to really appreciate anybody on their team who has that in their top strengths, who can bring it to the table when they're doing teamwork. Because that person kind of it opens everyone's sense of perception and opens everyone's view to a more holistic, wider, angle there.
Mm. So
Um,
in that case, you have a school that is kind of leaning, you have a cluster of different character strengths and you're mapping them and you see like a big gaping hole and here comes, Jane Smith, who is like prudent and self-regulating. And they're probably like, Jane, why, Jane? We're colluding with you. Right, because it's almost like they don't even have that little pie segment in their whole chart. So so it sounds like part of it is getting the other group of teachers to really appreciate Jane, who has these and it's probably not even Jane. My guess is it's usually the principal of the school, because every principal of the school I've ever met has this high self-regulation and prudence. I mean, it's just,
Right.
I don't know why, but every principal I've ever met at any of the schools that my kids have gone to have, so there's probably this kind of tension between, am I guessing right? I mean, what do you usually see in schools? Is it the principal versus the,
Administrators do tend to be a little bit higher on the self-regulating strengths.
yeah.
Um, um, and so but they are so important to the whole
Oh,
process.
absolutely, right.
So I have found, for example, I'm very high in love and kindness and all those helping strengths. I'm a
Yeah.
coach,
Yeah.
right? Um, I intentionally now, when I partner with anyone on a new project, I intentionally look for someone high in self-regulation and prudence because I know that that's something I don't like doing. And I understand that they are so valuable. And the more prudent, the better. I'm like, yes, thank you. If you can start to see that that's a need that you have,
I absolutely have. So that's really interesting. So almost thinking about, and I was about to do an online class with someone, and I met with another person who is sort of like me, and I thought, this may be a disaster. I mean, it's going to be fun. But then
it'll be fun. But will you get your assignment done, right?
right. I mean, I don't think so. So this other gal that I met, she's a program manager and she like gets things done. She's executing things on time. She's cutting things that were like, oh, that's creative, but we can't ship if we don't have this. So, and we were just talking about a project and I said, I know where the client brought us this project to do this IT project. And I thought, well, I can do it, but it will suck all my life energy if I try to do it.
See?
Because it requires, I mean, and so that's a real life example of what you're saying, right? Because it requires
It is.
prudence, bravery, like all these things, self-regulation, so it requires all those things. I'm like, I said, I can't do this. However, I think you would be really good at doing this. And she said, funny enough, this would give me life energy. And I said, well,
That's a match made in heaven, right?
it was like
It really is.
so I
If you
love that idea.
if you can see the benefits, if you can see how it can benefit you. So it's a shift in thinking. Instead of thinking about how their difference in how they perceive reality is irritating, look at it from the lens of this is going to benefit all of us. It's going to benefit our team. It's going to benefit me tremendously. And then try to use one of your top strengths to enjoy their difference more. So when I work with really prudent people, and now I intentionally bring them in on my projects, when I work with them, I use my curiosity and I'm just like, this is so interesting. Like you see the world completely differently than I do. And how interesting is that, right?
Yes, that's
And,
true.
and
Absolutely true.
it makes it a lot more fun. If you're bringing another one of your strengths to the table to help you enjoy the process more.
What I'm wondering is, so I think about this gal, and I absolutely love this one woman who I'm talking about, who I've just thought like we should partner together on this thing, and 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 the thing about like she's like it would be like sucking my energy. She would love doing it, and I lost track of what I was going to say. But what was I saying? So I darn, I lost my idea. I'm so sorry.
It'll
So
come.
yes, it will come back. But I do think it's interesting thinking about these parents. Oh, I was going to say this. I'm very thankful. Like I'm wondering whether it's just a certain amount of self-awareness because I look at her and I'm like, thank you for saving me from myself.
Yeah.
Like I'm actually appreciative that she has the strengths, and I think maybe if I didn't have a lot of self-awareness and knowing that I also have that these strengths create deficiencies, I may resent her or feel bad about it. But because I'm so all over the place, having someone like that is kind of grounding and helps me. And my son does that to me. He's like, Mom, if you want me to do all of these things, something's got to go. Like, you just can't, he's like, you're all over the place. I'm totally unmotivated. He's like, too many ideas, too many creative ideas. I don't want to hear your idea or your perspective. That's what he said to me the other day. he's working on his college apps. I'm like, okay, let's actually look at all these applications and all these different things. And he's, yeah, too many perspectives, too much love trying to help me, too much
I love
honesty and giving me feedback. And he's like, but I do appreciate it because if not, like, I'm not going to stop. Like, you need someone to self-regulate you.
You really do. These people that are different than us are really valuable. And also, at our age, we've developed more self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about helping younger people now
Mm-hmm.
as well. It's
Mm-hmm.
because what if we could help them to start to develop that self-awareness at a younger age?
Mm-hmm.
What if they could start to develop that intrinsic appreciation for the differences in others
Right.
and their own uniqueness and learn to value themselves and others more at a younger age.
Yeah.
That self-awareness is really the key, don't you think? Not only for your relationship with yourself, but also your relationship with others. And the world, we know, definitely needs improved relationships, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that what's fascinating, and I don't know whether you're finding this, I work a lot with millennials, is they're pretty self-aware. Like they're like, here's what I'm all about, because they've taken all these assessments, because they're all
Right?
online for
We
free.
didn't have them.
We couldn't take like 20 assessments, in 20 hours for free. So they're taking all these assessments. They're like, well, I'm this way and I'm not this way. So this means, and they're much more fluent than I think people in my generation in doing the same kind of thing. So it's very hopeful, I think. I have another quick question before we wrap up. So there's within these middle are these kind of stack ranks. So is there a certain line? I know these top 5 are kind of signature, meaning like regardless of what I try, this is my signature. It's going to stay the same. What about these middle strengths? I mean, and is the stack rank of these important to know about? And if so, why and how would you use that?
Those middle strengths, they're ranked all of them are ranked from your top to your lowest, and a lot of your middle strengths might be qualifiers for signature strengths as well. So I'm
Mm.
glad you asked that question. So if you'll put that back up just for a second, I'm going to speak to it. So you see those top 5, those are in general your top signature strengths, but each person who takes their strengths inventory needs to ask themselves the question whether or not those feel authentic to them.
Okay.
Because just because it came out on this survey report, you still need to involve your own
Uh,
making
okay,
process.
so like let me look at the next 5 below it for me personally is
Yeah.
spirituality, definitely true for me, perseverance, judgment, and social intelligence. Those are my 1, 2, 3, 4, and then humor are my next 5. So so I would look and say, wait, I mean, how far down the line would you go? Or would you look at any of them and say, well, I don't know what happened when I was taking this assessment. I probably
I
wasn't being prudent or checked too many things.
I
Um,
think you do need to look at all of them and ask yourself which ones feel more authentic. And I've been training now, I've worked with many, many people with this inventory, and by and large, the assessment is very accurate. But
mhm.
I have had people say, you know what, this is listed as like my number 20 strength, and actually it's really important to me and it gives me a lot of energy. And I don't understand why it's so low. For example, self-regulation is one of those that I've heard people say. And when you look at the questions on self-regulation, the questions on the survey are more about regulating yourself around eating desserts, you know,
Oh, right.
those type of, do you exercise? Do you regulate yourself around your eating habits and your exercise habits? But there are also people who are very self-regulated in how they choose to speak and interact with others,
Oh, okay.
their behaviors in other areas. So I think it's really important for everyone to just look at the list and ask themselves, does this feel authentic? And here's the key questions to ask yourself, especially about those signature strengths. Is it authentic? Does it show up often? Have
Mm,
people noticed it in me? I have people telling me often, gosh, you're such a grateful person. So yeah, people notice it in me.
mhm.
Strength. And then if you were unable to express it, would you feel empty or even dead inside? Then
Ah,
will let you know whether or not it's truly one of your top signature strengths.
Interesting. So for me, if I use that criteria, probably humor and spirituality. I don't know if I would shove out any of the other five, but I would add two. Is that me just
Yeah.
trying to be greedy? But like, I think that's what I would do.
I definitely saw humor in you today, and I was thinking that's got to be one of her top five, but it was a little bit further down the list. So you can give yourself permission to bring it up.
Oh,
You can
right.
have more than five signature strengths.
Okay. I can add more. I can have more strengths than just five.
Yes, you
Okay, I
can.
love it. All right. So tell us about your website and how people can get in touch again for to take one of these tests and get
Of
coaching
course.
from you.
So just go to authenticstrengths.com and then just look for the button on the landing page that says Take Free Strengths Survey. And it'll take you about 10 minutes. There's no cost, and you can discover that amazing survey for yourself and get that 2-page report that CJ was holding up. And then also the books, you can find these on Amazon. They're both on sale right now
Oh,
for
cool.
back to school special.
Yay.
It's being used as a textbook in a couple of universities right now, which is really
Fantastic.
cool. And this one's being used in schools in 9 countries. So that's how you can learn more.
How do you end up spotting people's strengths? I'm sure you're
Okay.
really good at it.
Yeah, so there are verbal cues and there are nonverbal cues. And so verbal cues, when someone is using their strengths and you'll see them, they'll speak faster, they'll use a larger vocabulary.
Hmm.
Their speech will be more animated, more energized. And then there are nonverbal cues, like you'll see them leaning forward. You'll literally see people's eyes light up. And
Hmm.
I saw that in you when you were talking about your creativity and
Hmm.
when you were talking about your humor, your eyes really lit up. So you might want to go back and watch the video.
Hmm.
Um, and people will tend to lean forward when they're using their
Hmm.
strengths. I mean, they're just so engaged. They're into it. They're in flow, right?
Interesting. Okay, so there's and I've heard that when I'm coaching with people, so they'll be talking about something, they're really talking, so they're like, "Oh, well, tell me about your job." You're like, "I really like my job." I'm like, "Uh-huh." I'm not believing you. And then I ask,
Starts rambling and they're just talking
yeah,
so fast and they're leaning forward and they're animated, or their posture may get really,
right,
erect. They'll just stand up straighter and taller.
right,
Those are signs that they're
right.
using their strength.
But how do you map them to the actual word? So for example, mine was honesty. So is it like, I want to be honest with you? Like, I mean, what? How does one know when so, when
When
someone
they're
is like? How do you map? Well, you said that you would see them. So I said something about humor, and my eyes lit up. So would I be talking about the strength, and then there would be some type of physical? I mean, how does it you experience as a coach?
or you might be telling a joke and then you just totally light up, like you come to life, and I'm like, earlier you cracked a couple of jokes
Yeah,
and you came to life. And I was
uh,
like, oh, humor's high for her.
right.
Um, so
Interesting.
yeah, that's when you see it, when they're using it and they light up. And also when they're talking about using it, you'll see it.
Okay. Well, how things? I'm trying to figure out things like judgment. I don't know how I would be lighting up of like, and then she said to me, like, I mean,
Well, I'm so glad you brought up judgment, because I really would prefer that it would be called open-mindedness, because that's
oh,
the other term for it. It doesn't mean judging other people. Judgment is
mm,
an awesome strength. It's being open-minded and expansive in your thinking, right?
uh,
Um, so open-mindedness, you can tell when someone's taking in all these different perspectives, and they're entertaining them all, they're interested. That's open-mindedness. And in the children's book, if is there a strength, because I think this children's book teaches in like a one-liner the strengths in a really fun way because they rhyme. Is there a strength that you're curious about, that you want to hear, maybe the
oh, sure, okay.
a rhyme of,
How
or
about
I
like forgiveness? I'm trying to figure out how
Ooh,
I would observe someone's forgiveness and go, okay.
oh, that's a good one. So let me find forgiveness. Here it is. So here's the picture for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
It's one child who broke the other child's kite,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And it says, If someone does something that makes you feel sad, but then they say sorry, their actions were bad. As you show forgiveness in a short while, frowns and bad feelings will turn to a smile.
Hmm.
So, letting go of resentments
Hmm.
so that you can feel better. That's the essence of forgiveness,
But
right?
how would you be able to tell that in a coaching session?
So, if how would you be able to tell if someone's using forgiveness?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. So, in a coaching session, I think the way that it would most likely come up is someone would say, "I'm really angry with so and so at work." And when I see them, I tense up, and all these manifestations of not having forgiven. And then we might, as a coach, I might ask, them to share with me why. And it might be anchored in an event that happened even a year prior.
Right.
Sometimes people hold on to things for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I might talk about, well, how would you feel if you could let go of that resentment and you could just look at them with a clean slate each day? How would that, impact your experience at work and your energy at work? And also your output, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just ask these questions and let them answer for themselves.
Mm.
And if there's a need to build forgiveness, then I give them exercises. There are really fun exercises in the back of this book. There's a
Mm-hmm.
whole list for each of the strengths if you want to work on building one. So if
Mm.
there's anyone out there and for example, we're talking about forgiveness, maybe if there's someone that it would improve your quality of life if you were able to forgive them, you might want to look up the examples of how to build forgiveness in the back of the book. And there's
Interesting.
examples
Right.
for
Can you give me an example of what may be in the back of the book for forgiveness? Is it easy to do? And if not, don't worry
yeah,
about it. I'm just trying
yeah,
to get a sense of so that I have a contextual sense of what that may look
yeah.
like.
So let me just put on my glasses and so here we are, build your strengths. It's on page 194 and 195 and 196 for anyone who's got the book already. And so for forgiveness, we have, here it is. Think of someone that you find hard to forgive. Try to see the situation from that person's perspective.
Hmm.
Consider if you had made the same mistake, would you have wanted to be forgiven?
Hmm.
And then another idea, make contact with someone who upset you in the past. Let him or her know that you forgive him or her, or just be kind to that person in your conversation.
Hmm.
Um, and then there's another one, when someone does something that upsets you, try to fathom his or her intentions in the actions. Assume the best in their intentions and do not assign bad motives.
Hmm.
So try to look at it from a different perspective. Those are some
Yeah.
great.
Wonderful. So those are some kind of questions to help you build the muscle. So if you actually don't have literally the strength, you can build the muscle by actually practicing some of going to the back of the book, and then practicing for an area that, let's say, forgiveness. Love it. Okay, this was so much fun. Thank you so
You're
much.
so welcome.